He was a billionaire, powerful and unstoppable, until one day he woke up paralyzed. But what happened next, when a woman who was once just his nurse became the love that healed his soul, will leave you speechless. Can love truly heal the deepest wounds? Stay tuned to find out. Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon button so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. This is not just entertainment. Every story comes with a meaningful moral lesson. Billionaire woke up paralyzed. She became his nurse. Then the love that healed everything. I remember waking up one morning, the world as I knew it, crumbling beneath me. The pain hit first, sharp and immediate. My body felt foreign, unresponsive. My fingers, once so nimble, refused to move. My legs, they were gone. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I was paralyzed. The doctors were blunt in their diagnosis. A freak accident had shattered my spine. They spoke of recovery, of hope, but the reality settled like a weight in my chest. For a billionaire like me, control had always been everything. I built my empire from nothing, a relentless pursuit of success that left no room for vulnerability. But now, I was a prisoner in my own body. The loneliness in that sterile hospital room was suffocating. The world outside continued, untouched by the chaos that had become my life. I had everything: money, power, influence, yet here I was, reduced to a helpless, broken man. And then, she walked in.
Her name was Sarah. I had never paid much attention to her before. She wasn't part of my world. She wasn't one of the glamorous faces from the business circles or the high society events I frequented. Sarah was a nurse, simple and unassuming.
I remember the first time I saw her smile. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a warm, sincere expression. But something about it reached deep into me, cutting through the cold shell I had built around my heart. She wasn't just here to care for me. She was here to heal me, in ways I couldn't yet understand. Her voice was gentle as she spoke, always calm, always soothing. At first I was resistant. My pride, the same pride that had fueled my rise, told me to reject her help. But as the days dragged on, I couldn't ignore her kindness. The tenderness in her touch as she helped me with the most basic tasks. The way she always seemed to be exactly where I needed her, even before I asked. Her presence became a lifeline. And as much as I hated to admit it, I started looking forward to her visits. She became my constant, the only thing in my life that felt real. There were days when I couldn't see the point of fighting anymore. Days when the weight of my new reality pressed so hard on me I thought I might break. Sarah would be there, never judging, never pushing too hard. She just allowed me to be broken, angry, lost, and in her quiet way she gave me the space to heal. One evening, as the sun set behind the hospital's tall windows, she sat beside me. It had been weeks since the accident, and though my body had shown little progress, something inside me had begun to shift. "I believe in you," she said softly. "I know you can get through this." Her words didn't just comfort me. They ignited something within me, a spark of hope, a glimpse of who I could be again, beyond the man in the wheelchair. I was a billionaire. I had built everything with my own hands. But in that moment I realized I hadn't truly built anything that mattered. Not until Sarah had walked into my life. Her belief in me became a force that was stronger than the pain. It was more than love. It was the quiet power of trust, of unwavering support, of selfless care. I still struggled. I still had moments of despair. But Sarah was always there. When I felt like the world was too much to handle, she would sit with me, hold my hand, and remind me that I was not alone. In time, I began to move again. Slowly at first, a finger, then a toe. But it wasn't the physical recovery that mattered the most. It was the transformation in my soul. I had always been the one giving, the one in control. But now, I had learned to receive, to accept help, to accept love. The kind of love that heals, the kind that doesn't demand anything in return. But then came the hardest moment, the one I wasn't prepared for. I could feel it, the growing distance between us, the unspoken truth that hung in the air whenever we were together. She had become everything to me, but she was still my nurse. I could feel my feelings for her shifting, growing into something deeper, more dangerous. And I wasn't sure if I could ever make her see me as anything more than a broken man in a wheelchair. I tried to ignore the growing tension inside me. The way my heart raced when she smiled, the warmth I felt when she touched my arm, her soft voice that seemed to penetrate deeper than any medicine could. But I couldn't ignore it. The truth was there, burning at the edges of my thoughts. I was falling in love with her, and that scared me more than anything else in my life. What would she think of me if she knew? A once powerful billionaire, now reduced to a shell of his former self, dependent on her for everything. Would she pity me? Would she look at me the same way? Every time I thought of it, I felt a sharp pang of insecurity. I wasn't the man I used to be, and I wasn't sure I could ever be that man again. Could she still see me as someone worth loving, someone capable of more than just weakness and dependence? It was a Saturday afternoon when everything changed. I had been working on regaining my strength, determined to stand up on my own 2 feet again. The physical therapist had left for the day, and Sarah was sitting beside me, as she always did, offering quiet encouragement. "I think you're ready to try standing again," she said, her eyes shining with a kind of hope that made my chest tighten. I nodded, gritting my teeth as I placed my hands on the armrests of the wheelchair, preparing myself for the challenge. It wasn't easy. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest. I was weak, so much weaker than I had ever been. But Sarah was there, right beside me, her hand hovering close, ready to catch me if I fell. Slowly, I pulled myself up. The world tilted, spun in dizzying circles. My legs felt like they were made of jelly, trembling beneath me. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, seconds, maybe minutes, but in that moment I felt like I had climbed mountains. And then, something unexpected happened. She reached out. Her hands cupped my face, her fingers brushing against the stubble on my jaw. Her touch was tender, and it grounded me in a way nothing else had. "You did it," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "You're strong. You always have been." And for the first time in a long while, I let myself believe her. I met her gaze, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no pretense between us anymore. Just raw emotion, vulnerability, and a kind of connection I hadn't thought possible. It was like everything I had ever known. My wealth, my status, my reputation, it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the love and strength we had found in each other. In that moment, I realized that love wasn't something I could buy or control. It wasn't about power or success. It was about opening yourself up to someone else, allowing them to see the broken pieces, and still choose to stand by you. It was about giving and receiving, about trusting that even in the darkest moments, someone would be there to lift you up. But just as I began to feel that warmth flood through me, just as I thought I had everything figured out, Sarah pulled back. I froze, unsure of what was happening, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. I can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "You need to focus on yourself first, on healing, on standing on your own." Her words struck me like a slap. It wasn't what I expected, not after everything we had shared. I felt my heart twist with confusion and hurt. She saw the shock on my face and quickly added, "I care about you more than you know, but I can't be your crutch. You need to find your strength on your own." Tears stung my eyes as I stared at her. She was right. I had been leaning on her in ways that weren't fair. I had allowed myself to become too dependent, but the thought of losing her, of pushing her away, felt like it might break me all over again. I wanted to tell her how much I needed her, how much I loved her, but the words stuck in my throat. "Sarah," I whispered, struggling to find my voice. "Please don't leave me. Not now." Her eyes softened, but she didn't move closer. "I'm not leaving, not really," she said. "But you have to believe in yourself again. You have to see the man you used to be. The man I know is still there, and when you find him, I'll be right here." Her words were both a comfort and a challenge. It was a moment of clarity, a wake-up call. I had been too focused on my weakness, on what I had lost. I had forgotten who I was, the man who built an empire from nothing, who had faced adversity time and time again. I wasn't defeated, not yet. But there was still a long road ahead. I needed to rebuild, not just my body, but my mind and spirit. I needed to become the man I was before, stronger, wiser, more resilient. And Sarah was the woman who would help me rediscover that man. But as I sat there, holding on to the edge of the wheelchair, the future still felt uncertain. Would I ever be able to stand completely on my own? Would Sarah wait for me to find my way? And what would happen if I couldn't? The days that followed were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. Sarah's words echoed in my mind constantly. "You need to find your strength on your own." It was the toughest challenge I had ever encountered. Not the physical struggle, but the mental and emotional one. I had been used to depending on my wealth, my status, and my control over everything. But none of that mattered now. Now I had to rebuild my life from the ground up, and the first thing I needed to rebuild was myself. Sarah kept her distance, but it wasn't in a cruel way. It was the kind of distance that allowed me the space to breathe, to think, to grow, and I hated it. Every part of me longed for her touch, for the warmth of her presence, but I knew deep down she was doing what was best for me. I began working with the physical therapist more seriously. I pushed myself harder each day, beyond what I thought I could handle. Every movement was a battle. Every inch gained felt like a victory. The pain was relentless, but it fueled me. I couldn't give up. And then, after weeks of hard work, the moment came. I was sitting up in the wheelchair, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was just a man in a chair. I felt like I was a man who had chosen to rise, to fight for what I wanted. I placed one foot on the floor, then the other. The world spun around me as I stood, not perfectly, not gracefully, but I stood. My knees buckled, and I almost fell. But something inside me told me to hold on. I gritted my teeth, planted my feet, and steadied myself. And there she was, standing in the doorway. Sarah. She had been watching from afar, silently waiting for this moment. Her eyes softened as she saw me standing there, wobbling, but standing. And in that moment, I saw it. Not pity, not concern, but pride. She was proud of me. I took a step forward, then another. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but I was doing it. And with each step, I felt stronger. I felt like the man I had been before, not the man who had everything, but the man who had worked, sacrificed, and fought for what mattered. When I reached her, I stopped, my hands shaking, as I gripped the armrests of the wheelchair. I was out of breath, and my legs were trembling. But I looked at her, really looked at her. She had stood by me when I was at my lowest, when I felt like I had nothing to offer. She hadn't just been my nurse, my caregiver. She had been my anchor. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I couldn't have done this without you." Her eyes shimmered with emotion. She took a step toward me, and for the first time in weeks, she reached out to touch me. Not as a nurse, not as someone just doing her job, but as the woman who had given me more than just care. She had given me hope. "You're stronger than you think," she said, her voice steady but full of warmth. "You always have been." In that moment, everything shifted. I wasn't just standing for myself anymore. I was standing for us, for everything we had been through together, for everything we would face together. But as I looked into her eyes, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The emotional barriers I had built up over the years, the fear of weakness, the doubt, they were all still there, lingering, waiting to pull me back. I wasn't completely healed, but I had learned something invaluable. Healing wasn't just about getting better physically. It was about confronting my fears, embracing vulnerability, and learning to lean on the people who loved me, especially Sarah. The journey was far from over. There would be days when I would stumble, when the weight of everything would threaten to crush me. But I now understood the true power of love, of support, of belief in each other. Sarah had given me the courage to stand again, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. But there was one thing that still weighed heavily on me, the question of what came next. Would I be able to be the man she deserved? Could I love her in the way she had loved me? And what if I wasn't enough? The nights were the hardest. As I lay awake in the quiet darkness, my mind raced with doubt. I had done the impossible. I had stood up, taken steps, fought back against my body's limitations. But what about the rest of me? What about the pieces of myself that had been lost during the long months of my recovery? I couldn't help but wonder, was I enough for her? Could I be the man she needed me to be? I had watched her sacrifice so much for me, given up parts of her own life to care for me. And now, with each passing day, I felt more aware of how deeply I had leaned on her. But I knew I had to be honest with myself. I had been selfish. I had allowed her to be my crutch, to bear my pain with me, without giving her the chance to fully live her own life. She had been my nurse, my caretaker, my rock. But what if she needed more? What if she was waiting for something deeper than just the role I had let her play in my life? And so, I started asking myself the hard questions. What kind of man would I be if I let her carry my burdens forever? Would I ever be the man who stood beside her, not as a patient, but as an equal partner? I wanted to be that man. I needed to be that man. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind already buzzing with the decision I had made. I was determined to take the next step, not just in my physical recovery, but in my emotional and personal growth.
When Sarah arrived, I was already sitting in the chair by the window, looking out at the world beyond the hospital walls. She smiled at me, but there was something in her eyes that told me she knew something was different today. She didn't speak, but she came over and sat beside me.
I took a deep breath, turning to face her. "Sarah," I began, my voice firm but tender. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep depending on you the way I have. You deserve more than that." Her expression softened, but she didn't interrupt. She just waited, her gentle presence making it easier to say the words I had been holding back for so long. "I need to stand on my own, not just physically, but emotionally. I need to find myself again, not just the man I was, but the man I'm becoming. And I want you to see that too. I want you to see the man who can stand with you beside you." There was a long silence between us. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to tell me that I was already enough, that I didn't have to do it all on my own, that she loved me for who I was, broken and imperfect. But I knew the truth. She needed to see me fighting for my own future, just as she had fought for me every single day. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm proud of you. You've come so far. But you don't have to do this alone. You know, you've never had to. I'll always be here. But I need you to be here with me. Not just because you need help, but because you want to be with me." Her words were both a balm and a challenge. She was giving me the freedom to grow, but also reminding me that this wasn't about being alone, it was about being together. About standing side by side, not just in the moments of strength, but in the moments of weakness too. I reached for her hand, holding it gently in mine. The connection between us had always been there, but now it felt different, more real, more grounded. "I want to be with you, Sarah. I've learned more from you than I ever could have imagined. You've taught me that strength isn't just about what we can do on our own, but about how we support each other. I want to learn to be the man who can hold you up, not just the one who needs to be held." She smiled then, a smile that lit up her face, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. There was still a long road ahead, healing, personal growth, and challenges we couldn't yet foresee. But I knew now, more than ever, that I wasn't alone. Not anymore. And with that knowledge, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about showing up for her, for me, for us. But as the day wore on, I realized that there were still so many questions left unanswered. We had come so far, but the true test of our love and our strength was still to come. Would we be able to face the future together? Would the struggles that lay ahead tear us apart or bring us closer? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for certain. This journey was far from over. The days blurred into weeks, and as I worked harder every day to regain my strength, something else began to change. I found myself reflecting on everything Sarah had taught me, not just in how to walk again, but in how to live again. She had taught me what it truly meant to be human, to be vulnerable, to rely on someone else without shame. I found myself questioning everything I had believed about success. All those years of climbing the corporate ladder, collecting wealth, building my empire, none of it had prepared me for the kind of battles I was fighting now. The pain wasn't just physical. It was the kind of pain that took you to your limits and then asked you to go beyond them. The kind of pain that broke you down in ways you didn't expect and made you question whether you'd ever be whole again. But Sarah, she had never wavered. Through all of my doubts, all of my moments of despair, she had been the constant in my life. And I realized, with a jolt of realization, that her presence wasn't just about her taking care of me anymore. It was about us. Two people, broken in different ways, learning to rebuild together. But even with all of this growth, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something left unspoken. We had grown so close, but I still couldn't fully let go of the fear that I might not be enough for her. One evening, after a particularly difficult therapy session, I sat alone in my room, staring at the moon outside the window. The air was thick with the weight of all the things I hadn't said. Sarah had always been there, her unwavering support a lifeline. But now I could see the small cracks in my heart that I had been ignoring. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. There was a truth I had to face. When she walked in that evening, I was silent for a moment, lost in thought. She sat beside me, as she always did, waiting for me to speak. "Sarah," I said finally, my voice rough with emotion, "I'm afraid." Her gaze softened, and she took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Afraid of what?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my vulnerability. "Afraid that I'm never going to be the man you deserve. That I'll never be able to stand beside you the way you've stood beside me. That I'm still too broken." She didn't pull away or offer empty reassurances. She simply sat there, silent, giving me space to speak. "I don't know how to be the man I was before," I confessed. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to live up to who I was. And what if you deserve someone who can give you everything? Someone who isn't broken like me?" For a long time, she didn't say anything. But then, she leaned closer. Her eyes locked onto mine. "You're not broken," she said, her voice steady. "You're healing, and I'm here to help you heal. But you can't do that if you keep running away from the parts of you that are hurting." Her words were like a balm on a wound I hadn't even realized was still open. She had known all along that healing wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about accepting that the scars were part of who I was. "Now, I've watched you fight every single day," she continued, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "And I believe in you, not because of who you were, but because of who you're becoming. And I don't want someone else. I want you, the one who's willing to face every fear, every weakness, every failure, and still keep going." Her words settled into me, sinking deeper than I ever thought possible. It was as though everything that had weighed me down, the guilt, the shame, the fear of not being enough, had suddenly lifted, replaced by something new, hope. I looked at her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like a man in a wheelchair. I didn't feel like a broken billionaire. I felt like a man who had been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild not just his body, but his soul. "I don't know what the future holds," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "but I know I can't do this without you. I want to walk beside you, not just as someone you've cared for, but as someone you can lean on too." She smiled softly, the kind of smile that made everything feel like it would be okay. "I'm here," she said, "and I always will be." But even as the relief washed over me, I knew the hardest part of our journey was still ahead. There were moments I would falter, times when I would question whether I had the strength to continue, whether I was deserving of the love she so freely gave me. And what would happen when the next challenge came? Would I be strong enough to face it? Would we still be standing together? Or would the weight of our past struggles be too much to bear? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew this. I wasn't alone anymore. And that in itself was more than enough to keep going. The days that followed were filled with small victories, and with each one, I found myself growing stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The quiet moments with Sarah became the most meaningful. There were no grand gestures, no speeches, just simple, honest exchanges, where I began to truly understand what it meant to be present. But there was still a lingering question in my mind. Could I ever truly be the man Sarah deserved? I was healing, yes, but there was still so much of me that was fractured. So much I hadn't processed, so much I hadn't faced. I spent more time reflecting, working through the past, the losses, the betrayals, the mistakes. And as I did, I realized something important. The man I was striving to become wasn't someone who had all the answers or all the strength. He was someone who was willing to be real, willing to acknowledge his flaws, and willing to lean on the people who loved him. Sarah had given me the courage to see myself for who I really was, a man who had failed, who had struggled, but who still had the capacity for love, for growth, and for change. And I had to accept that. I had to stop running from the fear that I wasn't enough, because in those quiet moments with Sarah, I knew I was exactly who I needed to be. One evening, as I sat outside on the balcony, the cool breeze brushing against my skin, I watched the sun set over the city. The skyline had always been a symbol of everything I had worked for, everything I had built, but now it felt like nothing more than a backdrop to something deeper, something more important. The life I was living with Sarah. She came up behind me, her footsteps light but steady. She sat next to me, her presence grounding me in a way I couldn't quite explain. "We've come a long way," she said, her voice soft, yet filled with the kind of wisdom that came from having walked this path alongside me. "And I'm proud of you, proud of everything you've overcome." I didn't speak at first. The weight of her words settled into my heart, a mix of gratitude and guilt. I had come so far, but it still didn't feel like enough. "I still don't know if I'm enough for you," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face me, her eyes full of something I couldn't name. "You're more than enough. You're exactly who you're meant to be." But still, the fear lingered, like a shadow I couldn't quite shake. Could I truly believe that? Could I accept that the man I was now was enough, not just for Sarah, but for myself? "I want to believe that," I said, my voice cracking. "I really do." Sarah placed a hand on mine, her touch gentle yet firm. "Then believe it, because I already do." Her words pierced through the walls I had built around myself, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about showing up every day, being the best I could be, and accepting that love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about acceptance, understanding, and growth. In that moment, I realized something profound. The path we were on together wasn't just about me healing. It was about us healing, about learning to support each other in ways we hadn't known we could. I wasn't alone anymore, and I never would be again. We sat there for a long time, watching the world go by, as if time itself had slowed down to give us a moment of peace. I didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in my life, I didn't need to. I was exactly where I needed to be, right here with Sarah. And though I knew there would be challenges ahead, I also knew this. I would face them with her, together, side by side. But what would happen when our journey took another unexpected turn? Could we face the trials ahead and come out stronger? I didn't know, but I was ready to find out. As the weeks turned into months, I continued to grow, not just in strength, but in understanding. I had faced my deepest fears and come out the other side, not entirely unscathed, but certainly more whole than I had ever been. And through it all, Sarah remained by my side, not just as my caretaker, but as my equal, my partner, and the love that had healed me in ways I never imagined. Together, we faced every obstacle, every doubt, and every challenge. There were moments when I faltered, when the old fears crept back into my mind, whispering that I wasn't enough. But Sarah's steady presence, her unwavering belief in me, and the love we had built helped me stand tall, even when my legs felt weak. One quiet evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, I realized something powerful. The man I had feared I could never be, the man I was trying so desperately to rebuild, was already here. Not because of the things I had achieved, not because of the empire I had once built, but because of the love I had learned to give and accept. I turned to Sarah, my heart full of gratitude. "I never could have done this without you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She smiled, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. "You did it because you chose to, because you decided to heal, to grow, and to love again. That's what made the difference." Her words stayed with me. The greatest strength isn't found in the ability to conquer the world or to never stumble. It's found in the courage to face the hardest parts of ourselves, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and to trust that love, true love, will heal us, even when we feel broken. The moral of this story is simple but profound. Healing doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the willingness to accept ourselves, flaws and all, and to let others love us despite those imperfections. As we continue to move forward, I know there will still be challenges. Life will throw obstacles in our way, and we'll face hardships we cannot predict. But with Sarah by my side, I am no longer afraid. I know that together we can weather anything, because love, real love, is the most powerful force of all. The story of my recovery, my growth, and my love for Sarah is a reminder to everyone that no matter how broken you feel, no matter how lost you may seem, there is always the possibility of healing. There is always the chance for growth, for second chances, and for love to guide you through the darkness. And with that, I understood that the true measure of success in life is not what you build with your hands, but what you build with your heart. The end.